Everything on our planet is interconnected. Every ecosystem, habitat, and species. Every ridge, stream, estuary, coast, and reef. The same is true for Hong Kong. From ocean to plate, sea to street, everything comes from the natural world around us. Coastal wetlands are some of the world's most biodiverse ecosystems and provide ecosystem services critical to supporting local economies. The more interconnected and biodiverse these regions are, the more resilient they are to withstanding negative impacts that stem from human activities, such as climate change, pollution, and coastal development. If we want to protect coastal wetlands, we also need to protect land upstream. Through water runoff, everything that happens on land has an eventual impact on the ocean. So, healthy land, rivers, and streams are crucial to maintaining healthy marine and coastal ecosystems. In turn, they provide a variety of ecosystem services that support our livelihoods. This is what the Ridge to Reef conservation approach is about, managing waters from source to sea to create a sustainable city where people and nature thrive together. A winter morning in Hong Kong. Hong Kong may be known for its lush greenery and subtropical climate, but in the hinterlands of Castle Peak in the northwest corner of the city, the landscape experiences a radical change. This is where we begin our journey. Erosion and runoff from these ridges affect what happens downstream. All the way to Deep Bay, located between the boundary of Hong Kong and Shenzhen. Everything starts from the ridge and begins from how we humans have altered this landscape. While Castle Peak's Chinese name means Green Mountain, these badlands appear exactly the opposite. Such landscapes are not natural to Hong Kong. Deforestation by humans has left its mark on the land, accelerating the process of topsoil erosion and downstream sedimentation. The resulting canyons are known by many in Hong Kong as Po Lo Shan, meaning Pineapple Mountain, because these hills, stripped of vegetation, resemble pineapple buns, a popular crusty-topped bun that can be found locally in Hong Kong. But the rock here is actually ancient granite, the second most common rock type in Hong Kong after volcanic rock. Once exposed, granite is susceptible to erosion, weathering, and surface water runoff caused by heavy rains that slowly erodes these gullies, carrying sediment downstream. Human activities also increase erosion. Hill fires, unsustainable tourism, collecting and removing plants all accelerate the erosion of these exposed ridges. What was once a lush landscape turns into barren land. But these eroded granite hills are not as barren or dry as they first may seem. Hidden beneath the rocks and inside sheltered valleys below the ridgelines, surprisingly tall trees and green vegetation hint at a secret hidden below. Hundreds of hidden springs, starting as drips from the roots and bubbling out from pores in the rock, flow steadily in Hong Kong's dry season. These springs collect into streams which carve shaded valleys, creating a surprisingly diverse habitat that gives species a chance to thrive and grow when there is less rain. However, some species have also adapted to take advantage of this challenging environment, at the cost of others. Such as this carnivorous pitcher plant. Although rare in Hong Kong, they are common in this area and a protected species. Pitcher plants have specialized leaves, which attract insects by color and scent. If they fall, they are trapped. By dissolving and digesting their unfortunate prey, the pitcher plants obtain extra nutrients for their growth, allowing them to outcompete other plants. Plants such as these are crucial to holding the soil in place with their roots, preventing further soil erosion and runoff, and preserving fresh water supply for other wildlife, like these wild boars who come here to drink and forage for food. Lowering down from ridges into valleys, streams converge and grow, bringing fresh water down towards the sea, and everything that happens upstream with it. It's here at the coast where the stream meets the sea. Freshwater and saltwater mix, forming estuaries, which are some of the most productive ecosystems in the world. This is Pak Nai, one of the estuaries in Deep Bay that continually receives fresh water from the streams around Castle Peak and seawater from the ebbing tides. Pak Nai means white mud in Cantonese and refers to the white mud and sediment brought here from the eroding canyon landscape of the ridges above. Located at the very northwestern edge of Hong Kong, facing Shenzhen, it's also famous for its sunsets that attract many visitors who come here in the evening to enjoy the view. Next to the estuary, Pak Nai also has large intertidal ecosystems, mudflats. And while at first these mudflats may not seem so lively, looking closer, one finds that there is much more here than first meets the eye. Intertidal mudflats across Hong Kong were once a common sight, but today they are often reclaimed for land development or artificial beaches. When population and demand for land grew, mudflats were often the first to be refilled and repurposed. Much of what we know now as common buildings or land today, such as the skyscrapers of Shenzhen, actually once looked like this. Pak Nai and the neighboring Lau Fa Shan are some of the rare pieces of natural shoreline that remains intact. Mudflats like these are continuously changing environments. Between day and night, high and low tide, dry season and wet season. At first glance, it may seem hard to see any life here. However, if you stand still for a while and look carefully, you'll find a dynamic habitat home to many species that can adapt to survive in this challenging environment. Invertebrates such as oysters, shellfish, sea snails, crabs, and small mud skippers feed off the algae and organic matter found here. The mud holds a large amount of organic matter coming from the tides and streams above. But other creatures are not so charming. This sandworm also feeds on the mud. It searches for plankton and other organic matter for a meal. Smaller worms seem to dare not go near. But there are always bigger predators on the beach. Egrets are most frequently seen roaming the brackish waters here, patiently searching for fish. Their long beaks are excellent for the job, but their prey can be hard to spot. Perhaps he'll have better luck next time. Vast beds of tiny seagrass also thrive in the mud, and although they are hard to identify at first glance and easily stepped on by unaware tourists, they are also a critical source of food for many organisms. And in Hong Kong, this species is only found here in Deep Bay. Horseshoe crabs also thrive here and feed off the seagrass. They are often called living fossils. Although they move a bit slower than many creatures, they have survived on Earth for over 300 million years, long before the dinosaurs appeared. Their body shape today still remains unchanged. Together, all these species form a delicate ecological community supported by food webs that connect land and sea. But today, many mudflats still face the threat of being destroyed, which brings absolute ruin to the small homes of creatures like these. They are also being converted into artificial seawalls and reclaimed land for human use, in addition to collecting washed-up trash from the sea and being victims to over-harvesting of their bountiful resources. In recent years, another threat to the health of Hong Kong's coasts has emerged from the sea. Invasive cordgrass seeds, washed up to shore and carried by ocean currents, have taken root on the coast. They grow aggressively, crowding out native species of seagrass and turning once biodiverse mudflats into plains of dry sand. Cordgrass is known as one of the world's worst invasive species and results in a dramatic loss of biodiversity. Invasive species rarely thrive in undisturbed habitats, but as mudflats such as these become more affected by human disturbance, sedimentation, and reclamation, they also become more vulnerable to invasion by non-native species. Invasive cordgrass also threaten another crucial habitat to mudflat ecosystems: mangroves. Mangroves connect the worlds between land and sea. Hong Kong has 8 local mangrove species and 2 invasive species. Combined, there are 60 mangrove forests in Hong Kong, covering 500 hectares. Mangroves aren't as large as many other tree species on land, but they are equally important. Their complex root systems provide stable nurseries for marine life. Their branches provide homes for snakes and nesting birds. And fallen leaves provide a source of food. Mangroves filter pollutants from the water, and they form a natural barrier to absorb the impact of waves, preventing coastal erosion and keeping the beach from slipping away into the sea. They are also a critical safeguard against the threat of rising seas from the man-made climate crisis. And they are also part of the solution. Pound for pound, mangroves can capture 4 times more carbon from the Earth's atmosphere than rainforests. Further out to sea, we find another organism that Hong Kongers have worked with for 700 years. Oysters. In Deep Bay, fishing and oyster farming have supported livelihoods here at Lau Fa Shan for centuries. Seafood has always been a part of the diets of local communities throughout Hong Kong, and traditional practices of harvesting, drying, and selling oysters are still seen today. Known as bottom cultivation, oyster farmers here lay out bare substrate on the mudflat, allowing for oyster larvae in the water to settle and grow naturally, mimicking how natural oyster reefs function in the wild. Another method for growing oysters lies further out in the bay: raft cultivation. Here, oysters are only harvested well after maturity, when they are large enough to be marketable. Oysters reach reproductive maturity at about 1 year old, but are only harvested at around 3 to 4 years old, leaving plenty of time to reproduce and sustaining wild oyster populations. In other parts of the world, people have over-harvested wild oyster populations to the brink of extinction. But in Hong Kong, traditional oyster farming methods have helped maintain wild populations of oysters in our waters. The brackish conditions of Deep Bay make the water here ideal for growing oysters. But the practice is now dwindling. There are only 80 farmers left, many of them nearing retirement. But by encouraging the continuation of sustainable oyster farming, we can help the ocean be more resilient to pollution and change. Oysters provide habitat for juvenile fish and their prey, which in turn supports populations of wild birds that thrive here. They also buffer wave action and reduce shoreline erosion by stabilizing the coasts and supporting the growth of seagrass beds. They also do an amazing job of improving water quality. As filter feeders, they can filter 30 liters of water per hour, more water than a 4-person family would drink in a day. The clearer water they create also allows sunlight to penetrate better, benefiting aquatic plant growth. And because oyster reefs are alive, they can grow taller and rebuild after a typhoon. What looks like strange pillars in the mud are actually beds of life and biodiversity. Sustainably growing oysters here can provide many ecosystem services benefiting both humans and nature, protecting coastlines, providing habitat, and giving a way for both humans and nature to thrive. Around the globe, there are success stories showing how implementing ridge-to-reef management improves the ecosystems of watersheds upstream and reefs and ocean downstream. Healthy and sustainable ecosystems are crucial for us to live and stay on this planet. But to protect these places in Hong Kong, we need to act now. Only hike on trails, respect wildlife, and avoid using fire. This reduces erosion and keeps the ridge ecosystem healthy. Take shorter showers and choose organic food, which reduces strain and pollution to water sources. Reduce waste and sewage so it doesn't end up in our oceans and on our beaches. And reduce our own footprint. Our actions on land do not end there. They also affect our coasts and oceans. Implementing ridge-to-reef conservation is essential to protecting these places and our own sustainable future.